The Lingonberry sock pattern from Twist Collective Spring 2012 is a little tricky to get started. My name is Lorilee Beltman and I wrote the pattern and want to give you the support to help you get started. It's constructed from a square. This mitered square is worked and then the toe and the cuff are worked afterward. This is what it looks like. See how this shape is basically a square? Well, the fair owl portions work here, and then increases and shaping is done to make a heel. After that, if this were a complete square, you would have to pick up stitches along the edge and knit the toe, and pick up stitches along this edge and knit the cuff. But what Judy's Magic Cast On allows us to do is to cast on the whole exterior of this square provisionally, leaving us live stitches to work in both directions. So with live stitches all the way around the edge in 2 layers, we're going to be able to work one layer inward toward the heel and the other layer outward. This way there are no seams and there's no ridge of a cast on with picked up stitches. Okay, I'm setting up and getting ready to begin the cast on. You can see I'm using a worsted weight yarn here so that it shows up better in this video for you, but I do have my waste yarn prepared and I've also made my markers ahead of time, which makes it easy. When you've completed the cast on and counted the stitches carefully a couple of times, what you'll need to do to get started is to point the needle tips to the right, keeping the smooth knit stitches facing you and the purl bumps to the back. Now that first stitch on the end here is a little flaky and you'll just be taking the tail, holding it in your left hand across the back of the work to secure it for just a minute. The first thing we need to do is to transfer stitches to waste yarn. I have my waste yarn threaded on my tapestry needle and it's difficult to get in them unless I first extract this bottom needle. That will give me access. And let's just take a close look here. I'm going to hold the working yarn and the tail securely while I, one at a time, shuffle these stitches off the needle. Let me move these a minute. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And once that is complete, what you will do is to get a hold of both waste yarn tails as well as that working yarn tail and to secure them together in an overhand knot. Now we have to prepare to knit, and in order for this needle tip to reach this needle tip, I need to extract the cable of the needle at the halfway point, as the pattern instructs. This is the magic loop knitting that enables this to work. I'm going to get a hold of my working yarn, and normally I would join to work, except we have a striped pattern here, so this is when we need to start the second color. So what I like to do first is insert my needle to keep things nice and secure. Then I can leave this yarn behind. We don't want to break it because we're going to do stripes. We bring in the new yarn and we knit a certain number of stitches. Now what we're supposed to do, and the number of stitches we're going to knit, is to mark the first and the last. And so I'm going to put a marker around that first stitch just now, and this will be my beginning of the round marker. If you use a marker on your needle, it will get in the way, it will prevent you from keeping your corners tidy, and it will fall off the needle. So I like to anchor it right around that stitch, as if it is a scarf on the stitch. So I've just finished knitting the number I'm supposed to knit. That's the last stitch. It is going to be the second corner stitch as my pattern says, so I'm going to put the marker that has 2 knots on that stitch. Now normally it's not a good idea to knit on a tabletop because it's not good for your posture, but while you're doing this setup you might want to do that. It helps to have the table hold everything for you as you go. The next step of the pattern says to take the second prepared waste yarn on the needle and to transfer those now to our second piece of waste yarn. It says to transfer a certain number, and I like to count ahead. At this point, that number should total the number of stitches remaining on this top needle, so I like to just double check my count and make sure it's good. Then I can just go ahead and transfer all of them. So just one more stitch to transfer. This needle is released. I'm going to pull the waste yarn through far enough, get rid of my tapestry needle, and now I'm able to take this waste yarn and secure those ends together with an overhand knot. Again, I want to leave enough space to put my foot through later. Now we're going to continue working in the round, and so what I have to do is extract another loop of my needle's cable. Find the halfway point, count them if you like. Now I'm going to join here again, continue, bridge this gap, pull things nice and snug, knit the first stitch, close it, give it a little tug, and continue to knit. In our pattern, this is step 6. Now notice I had to continue to work in the round, so I have to point the needle tips to the right, get all stitches on firm part of the needle, extract the needle from the back, so I continue to work in the round, and I keep going. Now once I have knit the number the pattern tells me to knit, I'm going to have to be ready to put another corner stitch marker in. Carefully count. Now I'm going to find my marker with 3 knots in it, and I'm going to mark that corner stitch by putting this little noose around it. Okay, let's take a look at what we have here now. We've just completed steps 7 and 8, and all of our markers are now in place. Notice how it's all smooth stockinette stitch. The stripe down the middle will be the stripe that goes down the center middle of the sock. If we look back at this sock, when you casted on all of those stitches just now, you casted on all of the blue stitches, 2 lines of them. That represents our 2 rows here in the middle. And you casted on these red stitches as well. Now right now, the red stitches are the ones that have the waste yarn holding them, and they will become later the cuff and the toe, cuff and a toe. But all we're going to do for a while now is to continue to work in the round, doing decreases at the corners and following the pattern. You'll have to go by on quite a bit of faith that things will work out. But now what I'm going to do is knit a certain number. Now your pattern will tell you how many to knit, and it says loop in brackets, L-O-O-P. I use that to indicate where the loop for magic loop knitting will land. And if you keep it where I ask you to keep it in the pattern, it really helps things go along more smoothly because you can double check your count so much more easily. And I am approaching round 3, which is going to be a decrease round. The decrease happens. Now I want you to take note here. I have my tails in the way there, so I just pop them off, and I'm making sure that this is not twisted as you do whenever you join to work in the round. Here's my center stitch. It has the red marker on it. It's the first stitch of the round. I now need to start round 3 by doing a centered double decrease, and you're told that this uses up the final stitch of the previous round and the next 2 stitches. We slip 2 as if to knit, knit 1, and pass the 2 slip stitches over, and we have tails here so it's not too tidy, but now we have that center double decrease with a marker around it, and then we proceed to the next corner stitch marked and do another center double decrease and continue working around. Well, that's the setup. I hope that gives you enough to get started, and proceed with faith and you will have a sock at the end.